Let's expand the conversation and get some perspective of the GEPF. We are joined now by its Head of Actuarial and Benefits, Brian Karidza. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. As South Africa's biggest pension fund for public servants, I know you're sitting with a public purse of around 2.2 trillion rand or so. What kind of investment processes have you put in place for inquiring members?
So in terms of the two-part process, we haven't changed our investment process per se. So if you bear in mind the actual benefit structure is such that you will have more flexibility in your savings pot, which implies that you need to have more cash-like assets, but you are now going to have this preserved pot that is only accessible at a later point in time. So we are confident that our current investment structure is sufficient to meet the immediate liquidity, but also has sufficient exposure to growth assets to ensure that members' pensions grow.
It's only a matter of days until the system comes into effect. I mean, the 1st of September is around the corner. What kind of questions and inquiries are you getting from your members?
Well, the obvious question which members are asking us is, when can I get my money and how can I claim? That is understandably so. The two-pot system is presenting an opportunity, or the first time that members get an opportunity to access their retirement savings without having to put their jobs at risk or without having to leave the fund. So members are obviously excited about having access to the savings pot. So a common question is, when exactly can I access, and how much am I entitled to, and how can I access this money?
And questions around accessing are quite important, because there's also quite a bit of information about when a member can access, how many times in the year that a member can access. Perhaps expand on that and also talk to us a little bit about the percentage in terms of those who are eager and willing to access.
Okay, so I mean, let's go to what will happen on the very first day.
Yeah.
So we are creating these two new pots or components, and you're starting off from scratch. But then the policymakers decided to allow you to transfer something from your existing benefits into the savings pot that you can access. So what you can transfer on day one is 10% of what you have as your existing benefits, but limited to 30,000. So what this means is, if your 10% is greater than 30,000, you're only transferring the 30,000. But if your 10% is lower than 30,000, you can transfer the full 10%. And that transfer is what has been referred to as your seed capital, and gives you a starting point in your savings pot. So theoretically, what it means is you can come on day one and have access to whatever that seed capital is. But alternatively, you could wait for that seed capital to grow, and in the GPF it will be growing with service, and then access a larger amount at a later point in time. So the current legislation stipulates that you can only access the benefits from your savings pot once in a tax year. So our tax year runs from 1 March of each year and ends in February of the next year. So what this means is if you come in September, the earliest time that you can come forward to request another withdrawal will be 1 March 2025.
And in terms of percentage, I mean, when you measure, or perhaps it's too soon to tell, but percentage-wise on the number of members who will be coming forward to withdraw, where are you standing?
So strictly speaking, it is very difficult, but we've worked with the worst case scenario where everyone who is entitled to a benefit comes forward. And given our estimates, we have sufficient liquidity buffers to meet that demand. But obviously the actual experience is likely to be less. But I think initially, because there's so much excitement, there'll be a large take-up rate. And once people get used to the two-pot system, I think that excitement will taper off and there'll be less take-up of the benefit.
Could we see the changes significantly changing your investment strategy? I mean, could you, for instance, be looking to liquidate any investments? Talk us through some of the complications or considerations you'll perhaps need to navigate during this time.
I don't think we'll necessarily have to liquidate assets per se. We might have to just slightly increase our money market exposure, but that can be done by holding on to some of the contributions that come in over a few months. Like I said, given our projections under a worst case scenario where everyone comes forward, we actually have a sufficient liquidity buffer. And then if that was to happen, it would mean everyone would now have a zero savings spot after September. And then they would have to wait for another year or so to build up a significant amount. So we're fairly confident that our investment strategy is in line with the two-pot requirements and can meet the demand. And we do not foresee a position where we have to drastically change our investment strategy.
On one hand, we know that the legislation has come under fire for using pension funds to solve what the critics have called societal problems. They've argued that the retirement funds should only be used for retirement. What is your position?
Well, as a pension fund, we always encourage our members to view their retirement fund or their retirement savings as precisely that. It's a deferred salary that is meant to sustain them when they're in their twilight years and they've retired. However, we are not ignorant to the problems that our members face currently. So we are fully aware that members have pressing current needs, and if it is possible that the pension funds can assist them to meet those pressing needs, I think it's a fair compromise to make. So we are open to this change. We are comforted knowing that members have some form of flexibility, but at the same time, there is compulsory preservation of the majority of the benefits. And that comforts us in that we know that when members do retire, they will have a sufficient pension to sustain them. And for the GEPF specifically, how it has been structured is whatever you cash in will reduce the lump sum you get at retirement, but it's not going to affect what you get as a pension. So we are further comforted by that.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on the conversation. Joined there by the GEPF Head of Actuarial and Benefits, Brian Karidza, as we continue, of course, the conversation around the two-pot retirement system.